welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa Life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The Spa and Spa Life, the SPA, is for seek power always, that power within you to live the life of your choice. I am so thrilled to introduce my special guest today, Dr. Sharon Cohen, who is a relationship and love consultant specializing in how we think, feel, and connect with others and ourselves. She believes that knowing and loving yourself first is the key to lasting happiness, and that relationships are what make us thrive. Through speaking, podcasts, and her blog, she shares tools to finding the love you want and creating the relationships that thrive. Dr. Sharon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Diane. I really appreciate being here.
It's great having you. Now, you specialize in helping women discover their authentic selves and making self-love and self-care a priority. Talk a little bit about, how is it that that's what you lead with? What have you found in that area?
Well, I really have found that women, sometimes we don't make ourselves a priority. We put ourselves second. We've kind of learned that we should please others first. And we've heard that through society, sometimes through religious organizations, and really it's that we have to put ourselves first. And we need to do this not only with our personal lives, but even in business, that we need to add a little fun into our lives. And it's how we are going to succeed, because if we don't put fun and play into our business lives, then we might end up sick. We might end up run down or burnt out. And so we really need to prioritize ourselves in order to get the best out of ourselves. And so I think it's most important.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when we talk about like creating, what I like to refer to as spa life, but it's like the life that you want to lead, you talk about getting beyond perfectionism, and particularly with women, getting stuck in that loop of that. How do you help them get beyond that?
Yeah, well, you know what? It's really about getting beyond that, taking imperfect action, really. You have to kind of take some leaps, because we don't, we need the anxiety to learn how to, our brain doesn't learn. Let's say this, our brain doesn't learn from pleasure. Our brain learns from fear and anxiety. So we have to step out. And men, actually, there's been research done that men will step out and not actually know what they're doing with only knowing 40%. But women really have to know 100% of what they do in order to raise their hand and say, well, I know the answer. And so we need to start taking imperfect action in order to get a promotion, in order to take that leap into entrepreneurship, in order to really speak up and be heard. So one of the things that I do with a program that I'm now starting with a couple of women that we're starting a program called 100% In, is to teach women to take that leap, to take imperfect action, and to raise our hand and say, I can do this.
I love that you're addressing this, because I remember a client of mine who, she was in corporate, and she said so many times, just right on like you just said, if she wasn't 100% sure of her answer, she would just hesitate long enough that almost always another man in the room would say the exact same thing that she was going to say. And then she'd have even further self-doubt and why didn't I stand up, and all the thought that comes in that. And I love how, you can really utilize how you're operating in your work life is, it's very similar, like how we do anything, right? Is how we do everything.
Absolutely.
And how that actually shows up in our personal relationships, and seeing what that actually looks like. Now, you also talk about that in order to step into those healthy relationships, that you actually need to get rid of things in your life. So how is it that, people can really look at this as a tool to really bring in the love of their life?
Oh, it's so important. One of the things that I teach women in my women clients personally is that they really, one of the biggest things to start with is to look at your non-negotiables as don't wants. And so what is it? Instead of, the law of attraction teaches you that it's really not good to look at what are your don't wants, but I think it's core. It's the first thing that you want to look at. So if you're looking at, for instance, say, I don't want a man who drinks more than I'm comfortable with, or I don't want a man who doesn't make and keep agreements. I don't want a man who's doesn't have an active lifestyle. These are things that are really core to my life that I don't want. And when you start looking at these don't wants, you're going to start looking at men and listening to them when they are talking on a first or second date. You're going to look at them differently. You're going to listen to them differently. And you're going to start taking men off the table that maybe you would have kind of gone along with, and you wouldn't have listened to them and heard their stories differently. For instance, a man was talking about, oh, I was partying last weekend, I was doing this last weekend. You wouldn't have heard that the same way. You wouldn't have watched how much he was drinking, because you drink more in the beginning of a relationship. You wouldn't have taken it as noteworthy. But if I don't want a man drinking more than I'm comfortable with is one of your don't wants, you're going to see it differently. And I think it's kind of similar in business. You want to lead with what are your don't wants, what are your values, what are you aligned with, what's important to you, so that you really lead with what feels good for you. And these are really important things to pay attention to, so that you know what it is that you want to go with in leading your business. I think both are really, really important.
Yeah, I love this as a tool, right? Because women don't always give themselves permission, because I think that there's a tendency to, like, we can make anything work, right? And if we don't actually put it out there that, hey, this is something I don't want in my life, right? And we do hear all about like law of attraction and positivity and saying all the great things, but I love this as a part of the process, as a tool to actually, name it and put it out there. And then along that process then do you recommend for people to then go, okay, well, what's the opposite of that? Like, to then, you can then turn it into a positivity, and that you're bringing that in. So is there a step that you go further in that to turn that around?
Well, absolutely, because you definitely do want to have the things that you want. I mean, it's not like you're only looking at what you don't want and only focusing on that. You want to know what it is you want as well. But the point is that if you never look at what you don't want, if you're only looking at the shiny objects of what you do want, then what can happen is 6 months into the relationship, you've been paying attention to those things, and the other things have come creeping in, under the radar, and suddenly you're with someone that you're like, oh my God, why did I never see that this man had a drinking problem? Why did I never pay attention to the fact that he doesn't make and keep agreements? Because just like you said, we can kind of make a lot of things work. We want to look at the best in people, and we actually will project onto them things that we have in ourselves. So if we're an honest and trustworthy person, then we're going to project onto them that they're an honest and trustworthy person. When in actuality, no, they were not making and keeping agreements. And we were making of excuses and whatnot for why they weren't doing that. So I think it's really important to pay attention to those don't wants. And then, yes, look for the thing like, does he have a job? Does he own a home? Does he, where does his mother live? Things that are important to you. It may be important to you that his family lives nearby because you like family, or it may be important to you that his family isn't nearby because you don't want them, getting in your business. But whatever it is, like, pay attention for you. What's important for you?
Yeah. Well, and maybe this work got evolved out of this, but, we've talked about like, what are some of the things that have disempowered us in order to then stand in our power? And one thing you and I share in common is being in relationships that we know that don't work, and staying there longer than we know, to then not recognize ourselves. So can you share a little bit about, how that was disempowering for you? What were some of the realizations that you had, and how you were able to turn that around to then stand in your power?
Yeah, I guess why I use the thing about a man drinking more than you want is that it never really occurred to me, because I'd never really been in that situation before. But I started dating a man who, he wasn't really drinking or using any drugs when we started dating, because he was applying for a job. And so I started dating him, and he was the man of my dreams. And it was a great start to a relationship. I was really, really in love. But as time wore on and he got the job, there were some qualities that came up that were not, they weren't revealed in the beginning. And as they started to be revealed, I started to become someone who I didn't recognize, because suddenly I was thinking that if he truly loved me, he would change, which is not how things go, right? That's not the reality. Someone's who they are, and you're who you are. And so as I was thinking that, then I started to become a person, like you said, who I didn't recognize. I started to just be a little crazed because of me wanting him to change his behavior. But then as time wore on and I got to be more centered in myself, and I started to realize, no, he can't change. He is the person he is. When he got to the point where he said, I really want you to marry me. I want you to have kids with me. And I was like, you know what? Thank you so much. You don't have to change, and I'm not going to marry you. And that was the moment of empowerment, of realizing I can't change you and I'm not going to change. And, we're going to have to part ways. And that was it. That was just finding the strength within myself to say, this isn't my future. And
Right.
I love you and you love me, and we're not meant to be together.
Right. And I think this is an important distinction, right? Because we can love people, right? I mean, you loved him. There's people in my life that I've loved. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be in a long-term relationship with them, or they're going to be the person who you want to share your life with. Because even though you can have a lot of things in common, if you have that don't like list, right? And those things that really gnaw at you, we don't want to change who people are, right? We want to see what complements each other and what actually creates a life that worth living and that you want to actually move into. And I know one of the processes you use as well is for people to have, that internal checklist, if you will, to really look at what lights you up. Right. So talk a little bit about that, about how people can identify those things and use that also as a way to really get to know yourself as well as the people that you're dating.
Yeah, I think it is really important to know what lights you up. And I think one of the things that we don't often do is get really quiet and figure out who we are and what's important to us. And I think that this is important to do before we get in a relationship, and also as we're in our business. And so either way, we have to find who is our wise inner guide. She's in there, and sometimes we're not listening to her. And so if we get really, really quiet and listen to her, listen for our instinct and our intuition, and listen for that voice within, and we can find out what it is she's trying to tell us. Because if we're not listening for that, then oftentimes we can get involved with people who aren't right for us, and we can start going down a path in a job or a career or in an entrepreneurial venture that doesn't light us up. We start doing things that we're hearing, we've learned a lot from other gurus and courses and retreats that we've gone to, and we get excited because we've learned all this information, but we haven't run it necessarily through our own filter to figure out, like, what if this makes sense for me? But once we run it through our own filter and we say, okay, you know what, this makes sense for me, but this doesn't make sense for me. I spent a long time trying to make somebody else's information make sense for me, but it really didn't make sense for me. And so once I cleared that off the board and said, okay, you know what, this piece makes sense, this piece doesn't, this person's stuff makes sense, this person's doesn't, and then threw some of it literally threw the information in the trash and said, you know what is aligned for me? What is aligned with my values, with my integrity, with, my vision, and then moved forward with that. And again, with my own instinct and intuition, then that's when things start to move forward for you and for me. And that's when you find, like what you said, like the lighting up from within. And that's when people are drawn to you and attracted to you, because you're radiating out a different energy. And that's with both your personal life and with business.
Yeah, wow. I so appreciate this distinction between knowledge and knowing. And I think people don't always necessarily see that, right? Because a lot of times, if you aren't trusting your own knowing, what do? You try and get more knowledge and learn more and get more information, and somebody else knows more than we know, right? And so it's so important. It's great to have knowledge. I'm a big learner. I love having that, but I love the distinction of pulling it out and checking it within your own knowing, because that's where you see whether or not it's actually works for you, is true for you, makes happen. And just because someone's an authority in a certain area doesn't mean they're an authority for you, right?
That's
And it
so
doesn't
perfect.
check.
No, that's so perfect, Diane, because the thing is I'm a huge learner as well, and that can get in my way.
Yes.
And I think that can get in the way for a lot of women, because if you look around the room at a lot of coaching programs, more often than not, there's more women in these programs than men, because I think men, again, it goes back to what we started with. Who has more confidence? And then they'll just start a business. They're not necessarily going to all the coaching programs to figure out what they should be doing. Women are, because we're the ones with a little less internal confidence. And so we're going to go and try and learn more and do more in that regard. Whereas men are just going to go, you know what, I'm just going to give it a try, see what happens, know? And so I think, that's where we need to get back in touch with. We do have an inner knowing. We do know what's right for us. But until we get quiet and get in touch with it and say, you know what, I got this. There's something within me that I already know the truth. I already know the truth. I just need to get in touch and follow through.
Right. Well, and I think there's something to say about trusting yourself, right? And being able to make quicker decisions and build upon that and just continue to just trust yourself. You can always course correct or shift and change something. But even coming back to going to different programs or working with different people, once you get that information, you can actually go through it and go, okay, what actually resonates with me? Pull that out. And I love what you say, just get rid of the rest, because so many times people go to things and then it becomes the classic shelf help, right? It gets put up there and you don't use any of it anyway, and you just get more of it. Instead, have the learning and distill out the part that really resonates with you, that you're actually going to do something with, and then don't feel bad that you have to get rid of the rest, because it actually allows you to make distinctions.
Absolutely.
It's so important to be able to have that. And I love how you talk about, when it comes to fear, that confusion can be a component of fear, because women tend to stay in confusion and not make a decision and hesitation and not trusting yourself. I'd love for you to speak more about how confusion is a component of fear.
Yeah, no, it is. I think, we can, and it's happened to me. I'm not, it's not like it hasn't happened to me, but where sometimes someone will ask me a question and it's like, there's some sense of fear or anxiety around it, I'll get like, I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. It just happened recently. And I have a girlfriend who's an intuitive, and she looked at me and she's like, Sharon, you know the answer. You're not confused. And I looked at her and she just looked me directly in the eye, and I was like, I know. It's just like, when someone looks you so dead in the eye and you're just like, you're right, and I was like, why am I acting like I don't know this? But again, it goes back to what I said earlier. It's like, but our brain only learns from those moments of fear and anxiety. And so it's like, why am I acting like I have nothing here? Because there's something about that moment of fear that I need to learn something in that moment. And so it actually is a great moment to say, why am I acting confused right now? What about this moment do I need to learn from? What is being said here that I need to gain knowledge from? Because there's something here that's wanting to keep me safe. And so what is it? I need to stop and really hear what the question was, or really hear what's being asked of me, because something in my lizard brain is wanting to keep me safe. So pay attention. Pay attention.
Well, and this is where it's great to have, mentors and consultants and coaches in our life, because we don't always see it. Because if that is our go-to and our default, it's that part keeping us safe. We don't really want to, it doesn't feel comfortable to go beyond that, right? And to have that happen. So, sometimes somebody else needs to actually see that. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more too about the new neural pathways. And I know this is probably scrambling some brains here about that we don't grow from pleasure, because that feels so counterintuitive. And I don't want that to be true, right? I want to be to grow from pleasure. Why not? So how does that work?
Yeah. So, well, there's electricity, everything is made up of energy, and our brain actually has electricity going on inside of it. And the only way that we get new neural pathways in our brain is through the electricity that happens from anxiety or fear. There's no electricity going on in our brain from pleasure. I mean, you can feel it when something good happens. It's like, that's nice. It feels nice. But there's no buzz. There's no, nothing zipping going on in your brain with pleasure. It's just a calming feeling. It's a nice feeling. But when there's anxiety or fear, then that's a moment in time for you to learn, because because you have to change something. Something's going to change in those moments of anxiety or pain or fear. like think about even like way back in the day with, there's a lion chasing after you or a tiger chasing after you. You've got to be looking around and figuring out, where am I going to run? Where am I going to hide? Where am I going to, what is the next move I'm going to make? And you're going to learn that so that the next time a lion or something's chasing after you, you're going to know how to deal with it even better. And so it's the same now. If you're going to learn how to solve a problem now, you want to know how to solve it better the next time. And so this is why you learn from fear, anxiety, pain.
Right. I love that. What a great distinction to be able to look at that. Now, I know one of the things you talk about in terms of having success in business and life is to have more balance between masculine and feminine. And I know there's been all kinds of thought processes around having less masculinity, standing in your femininity, and there's just like, there's a whole, continuum of all of it. Can you share a little bit about why we need both?
Yeah, well, I do. I definitely think we need both. First of all, each one of us, each one of us in a mixture of, we're androgynous beings. We're a mixture of masculine and feminine energy. Men are, women are, we all are. And so with that, it makes sense for us to be able to bring both of our energies to everything that we do, and to be conscious and aware of where those energies are best utilized. And so when does it make sense to have our masculine energy come to the forefront? When does it make sense for our feminine energy come to the forefront? Because each of these energies are valuable at different moments in time. So for instance, I was thinking about the word power, which you have in your title. And its power is very important. And I think of like Amy Cuddy talks about power stances. And power, you stand in your power stance, and that gives you the look of confidence. And it makes you feel more confident. But for someone who can't stand in a power pose, then what do they use? If someone's like sitting, I guess there's ways that you can look more powerful. If you're sitting, you can use your arms, but what if you can't use your arms? What if you're in a wheelchair and you don't have that capability? If you don't have movement beneath your neck. So I like the word potent. I'm kind of a geeky word person. And so like potency, you can use with masculine and feminine energy. So you use that with your language. You can be potent with your language. That's both masculine and feminine. And so
I like that word.
Yeah. So you can use it. You can take someone to their knees with potent energy, either in your masculine or with your feminine. Another way is like, okay, so let's go to, I believe that women are the spiritual guides of relationships and really of the world. And if the women of the world don't stand up to what's going wrong in the world, then we're not going to get anywhere. So we're the ones who have to say, no more deforestation, no more overfishing of the seas. We're the ones who are going to have to say, we have to, the masculine energy of the world needs to stop doing what it's doing if we're going to change anything. And there's an old Greek comedy called Lysistrata, written by a man named Aristophanes. And it's a comedy, but it's about how the women were tired of the war that was going on at the time. And they said to the men, you've got to end this. And the men were like, no, we need to fight. And they said, okay, listen, no more soft pillows on your bed, no more yummy food, and no more sex. And so what happened? The men ended the war. And so this is a great example of the masculine and feminine energy. And it was, again, this is a comedy. It's an example of the masculine and feminine energy playing together to make something good happen, the ending of the war. And so I'm of the mind that women can help good things happen in the world, but not of the mind that we do it by saying we're better than men or we can do it without men. Men are very valuable in the world, and we need to do it with men.
Right. I
So
love that distinction.
yeah, we need to be working together to making good things happen in the world. So
Right. I love that. And as we're, emerging into 2020, we're really looking at, what are our visions? How are we being positive disruptors in the world? And, it takes courage to, go against the status quo and, as you talk about here. But I love how it's like we can do things differently, but how is it we can have inclusive energy, right? Get really clear. And here's that decision making. So we're not in the fear, right? We're actually standing in decisions and not being in confusion. Those are ways to stand in our power. And I was very deliberate in using power in the title of the show with the, Live Your Spa Life, because standing in your power, it is a disruptor, because there are people that have a negative relationship with power because they think of the misuse of power. So I love that we are including things like potency and strength, and working together is strong, right? It's like, what does that look like, and how can we be courageous together? So I so appreciate, your work and what you're doing here in the world. One of the things, in terms of being, being decisive and creating, the life that we want to have. One of the things I love asking my guests is, we have different experiences in the different rooms of our homes, right? So I would love to know, we have a different experience in our bedroom versus our kitchen versus our office. So what is your favorite room in your home, and why?
That's a great question. My favorite room is my bedroom. And I am I'm a nap taker. I am. And I was born a nap taker. I've always been a nap taker. And my husband is not a nap taker. He doesn't understand naps at all. He's just, if you know anything about human design at all, for people who don't know anything about it, you should look it up. It's a very interesting new way of looking at yourself and finding out something about yourself. But my husband is a generator, and I'm a projector. And so he just goes. And I'm someone who needs rest. And so we're opposites on that regard. And so I, not only do I love it for the obvious reasons, but it's also my quiet sort of like oasis of rest and love, of course. And but it is my cozy, comfortable place, and always has been.
I love that. Well, how perfect for you to be a projector in your work that you're doing, because the projectors are futurists. They are our wise people in the world. They are who we are to go to for wisdom. So this is amazing. And from an energetic standpoint, being able to, they can expend a certain amount of energy, but then they need to restore it. I'm a manifesting generator myself.
Oh, cool.
So I do have quite a bit of energy, and I know that all of my manifestors and projectors in my life, pull that energy from me. So it's good to have people in our lives, and what a great match for you with your husband to be able to have that source of energy to plug into in your home.
Yeah, absolutely. It works well.
Perfect. Well, wonderful. Well, any final thoughts for our audience? Here we go. And I know people are going to want to be able to stay in contact with you, and how they can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. They can write me at Sharon. Let's see, I got it. So it's Dr. Sharon at 100% in. It's the number 100% in, PERCENT in.com. And then my website is 100percentin.com. And then it's facebook.com at the number 100% in. And there's also a free gift, and it's to help you set up each day for success. And it's 100, the number 100% in. No, it's just 100 in at mykajabi.com. And it's /100, the number dash in.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, and for those of you who are on the road, you can just rewind this and grab that back there. We'll also have it in the show notes to be able to connect with Dr. Sharon. And I just want to thank you so much for being here with us on the show.
Thank you. It's been wonderful, Diane. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And for our listeners, it wouldn't happen without you. Your most valuable relationship that we have, and the most wonderful thing that we all have, is our time. And we so appreciate you giving your time to us. And how we get more out in the world is, hearing from you. So we would love for you to put in the comments, and make sure you tag both Dr. Sharon and myself, any questions that you have, any ahas, anything you're going to do differently. And also, we would love for you to rate and review. That's how we get more out in the world, and that's how we expand. And so we want to get the word out about this. Anything you've learned here new, I'm sure you have a friend that you can tag and share in that. But we really appreciate your 5-star reviews, and to rate and review for us. So I just want to thank you so much for your time and for being here and being part of the community, because we work when we work with you. So we want to thank you so much. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Bye-bye.